Hi there, this is Dani Beaumont, and in just a few minutes, we're going to get started with the tips and tricks session focused on responsive resize. I'm going to give folks just a couple minutes to get settled into the session and check my sound. I think things are probably good. While we wait for that a few moments, today's the last day for the current Adobe XD Design Challenge, where you can win a MacBook Pro and a year's subscription to the Creative Cloud. To be considered, you'll want to create a contactless screen using Adobe XD software and the Tractive UI Kit by Cody Brown. You can find that UI kit if you go to adobe.com to the XD page. There's a tab there for resources, and all of the UI kits that we've delivered in the past are there. In addition to that, I and many of my XD colleagues are just about ready to head to Los Angeles next week for Adobe Max. I've been on the team for 6 months, so take that with a grain of salt, but I have never produced so many feature videos for one release before. Here on the team, there's going to be a lot of really exciting XD news. If you're not planning on attending in person, you probably know that by now, you can follow along with those announcements during the Max Keynote live stream. And you can learn more about that here on the Facebook page. Again, that's next Monday. We kick off California time. I think 9 a.m. is that first keynote. You'll want to tune in. It's going to be really exciting. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and focus in this session on responsive resize. It's probably not going to be the longest session that I've done, and I'm going to give you a break and take my face off the screen to give you a little bit more room to keep an eye on the computer here. And we'll talk about responsive resize. So as a whole, it took me a while to get used to this. As many of you know, being new on the team, but a pretty seasoned product manager, I have a lot of familiarity with Adobe products, but am being introduced to XD. I know the world of responsive design, and that's the idea that says that there are a lot of screens that are out there. And when you're designing your content, you want to make sure that the screens that you're designing will adapt appropriately to each of those different screen sizes. And if you've worked in XD, we've only been shipping, by the way, since Max last year. That was our 1.0 release. And if you look at the amount of features that we've delivered, I think it's been over 60 major features in this last year. We're gently building in all of the functionality that you've seen evolve for Adobe XD. And one of the things we have wanted to handle is the ability to repeat content across multiple artboards to afford things like responsive design layouts, where perhaps you'll have everything from an Apple Watch to an iPhone to an iPad to a desktop device. If you haven't guessed, I'm pretty much a Mac head, so when all you are is a Mac head, everything looks like a Mac. But really designing around all those situations and giving your stakeholder a sense of how that work is going to behave once you actually build it out can be incredibly time consuming. XD allows you to use responsive resize not to dynamically move things on the screen when your viewer is viewing its content. We haven't evolved that far. But what we have done is allowed you to come in and define very easily what's known as a constraint-based layout for the content that you're designing on these multiple artboards. So as usual with the tips and tricks, I'm going to kind of, the goal here, by the way, is for me to share some ideas and for you in the comment section to tell me what you're thinking. Tell me if you don't understand what I'm saying. Tell me if you need more information. Tell me if I've got it wrong. I'm open to that as well. This is how I learn along with you. But let's talk about just this idea of responsive design. So if you're new to it, there's different methodologies that have been out there. There were things known as alternate layouts, fluid design, fluid and fixed objects. I'm going to come in and just kind of show you just a few ideas around this idea of responsive design and kind of differentiate between the idea of objects that are pinned or fixed and the idea of percentage-based layout or a fluid layout design. So just what I would recommend is if you are new to XD or this feature, which we all are, spend some time with very simple objects on your artboard and just experiment with the way things behave. It'll help you with your mental model when you're then building more complex designs. So let's say I'm working on what would be a tile-based design. So I want to have a series of thumbnails or tiles. The finished design would probably look a lot like this example that I have here towards the bottom. But for now, I'm just going to wireframe this out. So I'm going to come in and select the rectangle tool, and I'll constrain it to give me a pretty good size square. And I'll come in and fill that with a color here, and we'll give it a light tint. And now that I have that set, I'll come in and select the object. And I'm going to go ahead and use the repeat grid just as a lazy way to draw a few containers quickly that I might work with. We'll go ahead and do 6 of them here in this set. And I'm going to ungroup them so that they are just a set of rectangles at this point. Now, I'm going to play around a little bit here. Close your eyes for a second because I'm going to undo the responsive resize feature. Actually, I'm going to redo it. Bear with me a second. I'm going to undo it. I'm going to make these smaller, and I'm going to constrain them. What I want to do is actually constrain them. So hold the Shift key, let go, and then release. And I want to just increase a little bit of space here for a moment. And we'll just do it in this direction as well. All right, so let's assume in this case I've got kind of a grid design, and based on what I'm doing, I might want to have 3 across on a desktop device, 2 across on a tablet, and 1 on a mobile device like a phone. As I work, I can choose between whether or not these objects are fixed in their height and width or responsive in height and width. And the way that that behavior manifests a little bit is if I come into each of these objects and resize those objects. Let's go ahead and make this guy, I'm going to struggle here for a minute, make this guy smaller. What you'll notice is if I come in and duplicate these guys and I resize them up again, when I double, in essence, the size of these containers, I also double the space between those objects. So this is what's known as percentage-based resizing, where this space that's here is about half the space that's here because I'm doing it in a percentage-like way. Another behavior that you'll see in the world of responsive design is this idea of having objects that are fixed in height and width and might be pinned in their location. So let's say I had another set of rectangles, just some cute little small ones here. I'm going to simulate a little bit of navigation. And we'll give this another light fill color. And I'll repeat my process there. So I'm going to create 3 of these guys. I'm going to ungroup them. And I just want to space them out here as I'm working. So roughly speaking, when I'm designing, quite often what you'll have with icons is you want the icons to behave in a different way than you would, let's say, images that might scale and take advantage of that percentage-based layout. When you have icons, usually in your design, you'll usually want to kind of create some rules around those icons. So for example, this icon, whether this is a large artboard or a small artboard, I'm going to want to have it fixed in height and width. I don't usually want to scale my icons. Buttons are another example of usually in your design, you'll remain fixed in the button size. It may change its position in your layout, but it usually doesn't change in height and width. Once I've defined that, what I do usually do as I'm building out responsive content is I want to make sure that that object, for example, this icon, stays pinned or fixed in its location to the upper left-hand side of my layout here. Now, many of you probably know we delivered fixed objects in XD a couple releases ago before we did responsive resize. And the idea was that I could define a pinned object that did not scroll at all. This is kind of an extension of that idea, where objects that are fixed in location in relationship to a corner or let's say relationship to the center of a design, or relationship to the other corner of that design, they're going to remain like a crowbar. They're fixed. They're never, in theory, they're never supposed to get any closer to the edge of your design than they are right now, even as you're resizing your objects. So with that a bit in mind, I know I'm just kind of jumping around a little in a theoretical way, but with that in mind, let's start to look at some use case examples of content that I'll work with in the XD application that I might want to resize. So let's assume for a moment I have a set of icons here, and I want to come in and use the same set on a larger artboard. Initially, if I come into this design, I'm gonna undo a little bit of the magic here and show you what XD was like before we supported responsive resize. If I come in and duplicate this artboard, or not this artboard, this individual design set of elements, and then I come in and select that first set and press and drag it, I get kind of what's not great about the world without responsive resize. So bad things happen. My icons are actually scaling. They're scaling in a disproportionate way, and things are not staying close to one another. So I can try to, let's say, spread this to the full width of this particular artboard, but my center is not even centered anymore, and my objects inside here are misaligned. So if I were to ungroup this and try to move everybody together, I could do it manually, but it's very time consuming. The XD team did a lot of research about how they wanted to apply this feature. And it's actually said that in some ways, why is the XD team taking so long to deliver some of the features? I think responsive resize is an example of why we do take as long as we do. What we did is analyzed a whole lot of applications that have this kind of a resize feature set, and we put some intelligence into XD. And we looked at common patterns and what users were trying to do. And we allow XD to pretty much do an automatic guess at what your intention is when you're resizing content. So if I come to this set of objects here, and I come over to my inspector here on the right-hand side, and I toggle on responsive resize. So I enable the new feature. And then I just come in, nothing really held down on my keyboard. I'm going to press and drag this group of objects, and notice how I'm getting a really nice behavior. This is an example of percentage-based layout. So as it becomes larger, the percentage of space between the objects is growing at a percentage. So if it was half the width, these spaces would be half the size than they are right now. But the actual objects are doing some magical things. The icons on the left-hand side here are remaining towards the left, again allowing, in fact, let me do this just to show the magic side by side. I'm a little curious myself. So when I come and increase the objects, notice that the intelligence for XD, it's just assuming that this icon here on the left should remain like a crowbar, right? So fixed to the upper left, well, in this case, because I'm dragging it horizontally, so fixed to the left-hand side of the screen. The icon in the center, it's assuming I want it to be centered in my design. The one on the right is fixed in its location, so not percentage-based, but yet the distance between each of these guys in the middle is percentage-based. Let's say you wanted to do that work yourself manually without this feature. If I come back up to this first object, and I'm going to come on in and just ungroup it for good measure here, so I can get to the individual items. And let's zoom in a little bit just to see what we got going on here. I'll ungroup again. Grouping still drives me crazy. Let's see. All right. Grab this guy. Silly egg. I might have some locked stuff here. Let me try this. Yes, demo gods are going to be kind. All right, I'm going to move on to this next little layout here. There we go. So here's my pieces parts. Notice I've got this guy right here. I've got the individual elements. Let's just pick on this lower guy here before I noodle in on this too much. I know. It's me selecting objects, never my favorite. So I'm going to escape up to come up a level. I've got a compound path, so I can hide and show this. I have basically most of the icon set. If I dig on in here, I can probably grab all of this guy. I'm going to lock this one and come on in and grab just this icon set here. If it wants to behave. I know layer groups are going to always drive me crazy. I'm going to come in and pick on another one. So let's say I have a design here, and I just want to take an artboard that I already have, and I want to make it larger. Now, by default, out of the box, although Responsive Resize will apply to elements that you have, we don't turn it on automatically at an artboard level. And the reason for that is, let's say I want to come in here and duplicate this guy, and I want to create a second artboard. And I want to just increase it first to make some decisions about how that larger artboard will work. By default, we allow you to come in and grab the edges of the artboard and just resize it. I'm going to hit undo, and this time what I'll do is select the artboard level, and I'm going to actually enable Responsive Resize. And I'm going to go ahead and drag both sides of my design and start to resize it. So again, I'm getting that really nice inherent intelligence, and it's really tough to see on a screen share that I have here, but in the upper left-hand corner, you may notice a very delicate little pink dashed line. These guides or coach marks give you an indication of the behavior that we're automatically using in resizing these objects. So let's say I resize to a certain position. If I want to understand the logic that XD is automatically applying here, I can come into any individual object. We know how I love to select objects here. Let's say I come on into these little carrier dot group that I have here. So I select that guy, the signal strength bit, right? Notice here in the right-hand side, Responsive Resize is turned on, and it's set to automatic. If I click on manual, I can look underneath the curtain, basically, to get a sense of the behavior that's being applied. So remember how we noticed that the icons on the left side of the screen were fixed in their position? They were connected to that left side. I can see that here. So XD does have that sophisticated responsive design palette that you've seen in other tools. We're just using some really intelligent logic on top of that. So I can see that XD automatically knows for this design element here on the left, lock it to the left-hand side. Notice I have fixed width and height defined. That means that I don't want the way those icons were scaled up and down. I don't want those to be skewed or resized as I drag the edges of the object. Now things were pretty good, but notice that there was one element that just didn't behave. Maybe I did that on purpose. We know that 90% of the time, maybe 85% of the time, XD is going to intelligently guess at what your intention is with your design elements, but we're not going to get it right every single time. So a way that you can give XD more information about how elements should behave is by grouping them into certain layer sets. So remember that first icon example. When I spread them all out across the screen, I liked having percentage-based spacing between them. That was appropriate. But for this little carrier signal sign, I don't want that. I want it to be associated with the other two elements on the left there. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that change and bring things back in a little bit. And I'm going to dig into my favorite feature, the layers of the tool, as I've already complained a little bit about them. I'm going to come in and select all three of these objects. And I'm going to group them together. So see how I have three objects here. I could probably just come into this Wi-Fi thing. Yeah, it's a thing. And I could press and drag it into the signal strength group. So they're now a group of three together now. When I zoom out, I'm going to come on in and grab that artboard that's set to be responsive in its behavior. And I'll just press and drag this guy out a little bit. Notice that I'm getting the right kind of behavior that I wanted here with that little pie element. Same thing for this very slight little thriller element down here. It's not behaving the way I'd like it to. So I'm going to undo that resize, come on into that thriller element, and drag that into a layer group. So I've got the copy set. This is all the text. If I group those objects together, and once again come on in and select this guy, and press and drag it, I get some nice behavior here. So these objects are remaining together. They're staying tight together. The objects to the left are staying to the right. Centered content is centered. As I'm working, I may want to make other design decisions. For example, this play button, I may want it to become larger on a larger screen. Also, I have the ability to, the images are going to automatically scale to fill the container pretty appropriately. But once I've done my work, I can always come back and override that. So let's say I come on in and double click on the image that's here, get inside this mask. I can resize that image and reposition it, and then click off. So I have control over that. All right, looks like we've got a question in from Eric. If a group is selected with the responsive feature, can I look in real-time behavior in the prototype? Is it a tool for fashion design? I'm trying to follow this question. So if a group is selected with responsive feature, can I see it in real-time behavior in the prototype? The answer is no. I'm with you. I mean, it was kind of my first instinct, is if I'm looking, so I believe the nature of the question is, and we just don't have these features right now. Let's assume for a moment, I'm going to kind of prototype out an idea real quickly here. Badly, obviously. Let's try that again. I'm going to select this artboard. Don't get excited because I'm about to tell you what we don't do, but I like to be transparent. So let's say I was in my prototyping app here, and I'm looking at this guy. And let's say XD added a feature that said, hey, can you show me this in landscape mode? It'd be awfully nice if it automatically just rotated everything and did the magic for me to simulate basically a responsive design that is been actually built up as a native app. We do not have that right now. I crave that capability. The good news is that you do have the ability to duplicate these elements and resize them pretty quickly, but to show orientation, for example, or the same exact content on different size screens, you are going to need to duplicate that content. All right, sorry to disappoint you, Eric. Okay, let's keep going a little bit. I've got a couple other examples. Here's one that, again, the goal of this session is not to show just perfection videos. I do enough of those. It's to kind of get a little caught up in the weeds as you work, because I want to give you a better understanding of what's underneath here. Let's say I'm working on this design, and I want to resize the content that I have on this already larger artboard. So I come on in, and I just select the group set, and I just kind of press and drag the content to make it larger. This is an example of XD not exactly getting everything right. So it's made a pretty good guess, but it's blown it in a couple ways. I've got this first name, last name element. Also, personally, I think buttons that grow are gross. I think that buttons like icons should remain fixed in height and width. So I want to come in and make changes to that. There's a mental model here that I'm still getting my head around it, but I'm going to explain it. And maybe it's because I grew up in web design a little bit more, tools like Dreamweaver and Muse, and the way it thinks about responsive design. When XD is looking at a group of elements and you're defining the relationship of those elements, you're doing it in relationship to the selected set and not to the overall screen, okay? So, for example, if I come into this group set and I say that I want the first name to be locked, that crowbar to be fixed in location, it's going to be in relationship to this group, not necessarily in relationship to the edge of the design or this screen. So let's kind of dig in on this a little bit. I'm going to come to this selected set, and I'm just going to command click to get to that first name option, or the first name field. And notice here in the manual mode, I can see what the settings are. And the reason why this guy did not scale in width the way the other elements did is that it's fixed in width here in the automatic resize feature. If I uncheck that, come to the second object, make sure that it's unchecked, I'll probably get a better behavior. I'm going to go ahead and hit escape and now press and drag. All right, things are getting better, but that's and again, I'm embarrassed when I make mistakes, but I think it's what we're supposed to do together, which is understand what's going on. Where you are in the hierarchical set in the layers panel is important. So if I click in here again, I need to check out exactly where I am. So I'm here on the name label, right? See how I have the name label? And if I go to manual mode, that guy is still set to fix width, so I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to hit escape and go up a level. That is not fixed in width. And I'll go up a level to the group. So I'm still getting funny behaviors. Let's check these guys. Yeah, there's a level to which I'm not comfortable being embarrassed. It's also interesting when you record things because I swear I just set that to be fluid width. All right, we're getting better. The other bit is to check and see if this object is actually pinned at all. So I'm going to come into this guy and this guy, and I'm going to escape up a level. Notice that it's set to align to that right-hand side. I want this to just be fluid. I'm going to hit escape and see if I get better behavior. I'm getting better. It's actually doing the right thing. I just need to let its buddy here do the same thing. So I'm going to click on in, make sure each of my manual settings are right. I don't want it fixed in width. I don't even, let's go ahead and leave it. I'm going to not. I want this to be percentage based. I'm going to swing up a level. Let's go ahead and uncheck these two objects, come up a level again, and see how our results are. So I'm now getting the kind of behavior I wanted. You say to me, Dani, that was a little painful. And I say to you, because we're talking to each other, that's why the fact that XD decided to do, basically we decided to implement this auto mode, and the fact that we get it right 90% of the time is so amazing. Because as I mentioned, other tools let you do this, but it is so difficult to try to configure every single element in its hierarchical structure. Having this auto mode makes a lot of sense. I can also come in here and I've already stretched things out, but if I want to make sure that this button does not scale, I can come in and choose to center it and then make sure that its settings are set to be fixed in height and width. I like that. Align to the bottom is also good. So that if this were to become even larger, let's see how our behavior goes. And I grab this guy. I'm getting a nice button that's staying centered in my design, if that's how I choose to have it behave. Additionally, I can come into this text field and make sure that it is also set to be, I don't want it fixed in all directions here. I want this to be fluid. So I'm going to experiment again a little bit. Let's just set all of these to be fluid. And I'm going to hit escape. And I'm going to resize and see what's going on here. This is probably my hierarchy. So notice that if I go to manual mode, this guy's in good shape. If I hit escape, this group set here is fixed in width, which is messing me up a little bit. So now when I come out and resize, it's starting to be more fluid. If I were to exaggerate it, you can see how that text is flowing to align with the width of the container. All right, I'm pretty good at eating up time. So we're kind of at the half-hour mark. One thing I do want to mention in full disclosure is that if you work with symbols, so let's say I step out of this design a bit and I come to this header set. If these are defined as symbols, that is fine. They can absolutely be symbols. But what we're not supporting right now is if I took this whole header content and made it a group symbol. So if I grouped all of these objects, we know how I love to group things together and select layers. Let's do this one more time. So if I grab this set, which is a little too much, this guy right here, oh my goodness, I know I do it to myself. But if I grab that group set and I created it as a symbol and I try to resize it, Responsive Resize does not work with grouped symbols. If I break it apart as individual symbols, that is supported. But group symbols right now did not make the release that we're showing. It is something that the team is looking at very keenly, and we understand why you'd want to keep grouped symbols and have them be fully responsive. We're getting there. We just need a little bit more time. So that is pretty much it for me today. You guys have been light on questions, so I'm disappointed. but I'm going to encourage you to come back after Max. So as I mentioned, next week we're going to be there at the event. The week after, I believe I have another tips and tricks, same time, same place, so Wednesday at this time. And there's some incredibly good stuff I'm really excited to be able to start showing you at that time. So please come back. If you want to take a look at any of the content that I've created for XD, you can go to my YouTube channel. So if you put in Ping Dani, you'll probably find me. There is about 20 new feature demos that I've developed since I joined the team. And there are also a few of these tips and tricks recordings if you'd like to watch them. Thank you for your time. Can't wait to see you all again. Come up with better questions next time and I'll get better at my selection state. Fair enough. Okay, thank you.